Hey, everybody, we're going to give it about 60 seconds and then we'll go ahead and get started. But thank you for joining today's webinar. All right, welcome to today's webinar, Migrations. Clients share top 10 lessons learned. I am Jay Martin, your host for the next couple of hours. Certainly, if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, please add them to the Q&A section on the right side of your screen. And we'll make sure that our experts do their best to answer them each before the end of the webinar. I am proud to introduce our many guests today, including Ben Schreiner of AWS, Ryan Leland of Repligen, David Pulaski from CloudChomp, Curtis Stanley of Cure4U, and Ben May, one of the fine solution architects over at ClearScale. Before we begin, I'd like to go around the horn, starting with Ben Schreiner as he introduces himself and gives a brief overview of this wonderful AWS I keep hearing about.
Appreciate it, Jay. Thanks so much. Hello, everybody. Ben Schreiner here. I lead the migration practice for AWS in the US, focused on small and medium businesses and partnered with ClearScale. I can say that we've had a lot of interest in AWS in the recent months. A lot of people have sped up their digital transformation plans as a result of COVID-19. So AWS, as everybody knows, is the #1 cloud provider, public cloud provider, has the most services and full-featured services, highest security standards, and we're very much looking forward to sharing some of our best practices and hearing from some of these great customers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ben. And now if our other Ben May, would introduce himself and give a quick overview of ClearScale.
Great. Hi, all. My name is Ben May. I'm a solutions architect at ClearScale. I do work from designing systems throughout the pre-sales process all the way to delivery. And ClearScale is a premier partner of Amazon, of AWS. We have 10 competencies going from migrations, DevOps, all the way down to developing IoT and mobile applications. We do all kind of things like architecture designs, integrations, automation, management, and application development. So really anything in the wheelhouse of Amazon, we deliver on that.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. And now, David, if you'd please give us some background on CloudChomp.
I'm David Pulaski, the co-founder of CloudChomp, and I'm feeling a little inadequate now. ClearScale has way more competencies than us, I'm noticing, but we're an advanced technology partner with 2 competencies. One is in migration, and the other is Microsoft workloads. We have been providing migration planning tooling to the market for over 4 years and have done a number of migrations with our friends at ClearScale and Amazon, and are looking forward to sharing what our technology can do to help advance your projects. So thanks for having us.
Excellent. We also have a pair of customers, including Repligen and Ryan Leland. Ryan, if you tell us a little bit about Repligen.
Hi. So what we do at Repligen is we produce equipment as well as bioprocessing for companies that create drugs and other treatments and products. So we don't create the drugs, but we're in the industry that helps the drug manufacturers as well as other therapeutics create their products.
And what is your role with Repligen again, Ryan?
So my role here at Repligen is I'm the primary systems engineer, which means that I have a global role. I help our manufacturing facilities world round get their jobs done, as well as integrate the data and try to keep things stable as well.
Excellent. And that takes us over to Curtis. Last but not least, Curtis, if you could tell us a little bit about Cure4U, please. And it looks like Curtis might be having some issues with his mic. We'll get that resolved. But Cure4You serves over 15,000 daily users of the MyCare plan, patient engagement and virtual care platform. And as we'll hear later, fortunate for Cure4You, they had gone through a migration process prior to COVID-19, which set them up for really the accelerated growth that they've seen. And it looks like Curtis is now readily available. So hopefully I didn't steal too much of your thunder, Curtis.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I got tangled up in the clicks here. Sorry about that. Yeah, my name's Curtis Stanley. I'm the COO and the Chief Administrative Officer for Cure4You. We're a small company, rapidly growing about 800% year over year since 2015. We're about virtual patient engagement, patient support. We started in Denmark about 2004. Had about 60% of the Danish population on this platform, brought it to the US and set up the US company in 2015. And so last year, as we really began to scale, ClearScale helped us really get prepared for that and to establish the kind of competencies we didn't have and that we needed in the cloud hosting environment. So glad to be here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, that leads us to our four-pronged approach to the webinar, where we'll start with Ben Schreiner discussing the business drivers leading to migration, followed by Repligen providing their personal use case, CloudChomp introducing us to their supporting solution for migration, and then explore Cure4You's overall experience. So as we proceed, we'll now switch over to Ben's presentation as he discusses the common business drivers for migration. Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jay. And we'll give it a second for the internet to catch up. Jay, if you'd confirm when you can see the top 10 slides.
Absolutely. I'm seeing it thinking, and it should almost be there. All right. You are all set, Ben.
All right. Super. Appreciate it. Thanks again, everyone. I'm going to share top 10 lessons learned by AWS helping customers migrate, and we absolutely will touch on the drivers that kick things off. First and foremost, AWS has been at this for almost 20 years, and we view your journey to the cloud as a transformational opportunity, and hopefully you see it the same way. I know our friends at ClearScale view it that way. It is a huge opportunity. Not only to rethink your business and how you engage your customers, but how you deliver IT services and the way you deliver IT services. It is truly an opportunity to be seized, and I'd say the time is now, and many customers are looking at just how do they do it and where do they get started. So I talk to CIOs, chief architects, CEOs often. This morning I was on with a COO discussing their company and his plans for growth as we come out of the pandemic. Right now they're trying to control cost and kind of survive the situation that they're in while engaging the customers that they have and looking to grow. So these 8 drivers are the most common that I hear from customers day in and day out. And I'd submit to everybody here that most customers have at least 2 or 3 of these as objectives or reasons why they're looking to the cloud. Many are looking just to get more agile or more staff productivity. I think all of us are tired of the statement "do more with less," and if we keep getting less and less, it's really hard to do more and more. So cost reduction, staff productivity certainly play a role. Some folks have outsourced or have end-of-life hardware or software, and you're at a fork road where you have to upgrade to new hardware because the old software you have requires a bigger box. So now you're not only investing in software, but having to put a new hardware platform underneath it. And quite frankly, we want to stop that legacy cycle of managing and maintaining hardware boxes. Improve security, compliance, and operational resilience. Everybody knows there's bad guys out there. They don't care who you are. And quite frankly, it's getting harder harder and harder to keep up with all of the patches and everything that needs to happen, both with physical security, network security, and your applications themselves. AWS has a shared responsibility model where we take responsibility for the physical all the way up to the instance, and then you are responsible for your applications and your data, very importantly. But you inherit, when you come to AWS, all of our security capabilities and best practices, which are what I like to say is military grade. We have some of the biggest agencies around the world leveraging our platform, both because of the security nature and how you can manage your data security. Data center consolidation, whether it's mergers and acquisitions or just how you grew, but having multiple colos and multiple data centers is expensive. It's complicated and complex to manage and maintain, and centralizing those things can provide economies of scale. And then with our architecture, you get the resilience of having multiple regions and leveraging data centers without having to pay to have things residing in separate facilities. Expansion globally, if that's of interest and you want to be closer to your customers or have your data closer to your customers, we have the ability to do that. Digital transformation means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I think we can all agree that IT is an evolution, and right now change is happening faster and faster, and our customers expect more and more from us, whether that be your end customers at the company or your internal customers that you support. Everybody's getting more and more demanding of technology, and your ability to react, the speed with which you can react, is really what digital transformation is all about. It's how do you engage, how do you respond, and then there's cool new services around IoT and AI and ML and streaming data. There's all kinds of things that are coming out, and AWS is right at the cusp of that, pushing our platform forward and innovating almost on a weekly basis. So I wanted to do this in a top 10 format to be consistent with the theme here. And if you look at this one is, the number one thing is to know your whys, right? So why are you doing this? And it's really important. And again, hopefully at least a few of those resonated with you. I wanted to share with you AWS's whys. Our whys are, we wanted to provide agility to our customers. We wanted to provide operational efficiencies. We've learned a lot from first starting supporting the growth of Amazon.com, how to run efficient, scalable infrastructure. And then AWS was born out of the idea that we've learned a lot, and we think other companies would and could benefit from it. And that's where the concept of the cloud originated. And then finally, it's reducing risk. It's designing architectures that can grow and expand and contract when needed, so you can handle spikes. And then when you're not using things, you reduce your footprint and you reduce your bill. And that's just not something that a legacy architecture can support, or an on-prem or colo kind of situation can support. You pay, for maximum capacity, whether you use it or not. We have a concept of the stages of adoption. Most start with a project, just to start to get familiar, kind of dip your toe in the pool, and then quickly lead to a foundation of experience, knowledge, and comfort. And then we start talking about migrations, and that's really the crux of today's talk. But that's really the focal point that I'll talk to. Our second best practice or lessons learned is follow a proven methodology. The Migration Acceleration Program at AWS is proven. Tens of thousands of customers have gone from wherever they were to AWS. And this methodology was originated by AWS Professional Services. They've learned a ton of best practices and have a lot of lessons learned that have gone into this approach and this methodology. And our friends at ClearScale are well versed. They have the migration competency, and they practice this approach to migrating. There's tools, obviously partners like ClearScale, training and investments associated with helping people accelerate their transition to AWS. Our CEO, Andy Jassy, has a great quote that there's no compression algorithm for experience. I couldn't agree more. And if you're not experienced with the cloud in AWS, it is important. And our third best practice is leverage the experience of others to mitigate risk and go faster. So again, our friends at ClearScale have a lot of experience helping customers such as yourselves evaluate their situation, weigh the pros and cons of different options, and then accelerate and execute that migration plan. A typical customer journey is certainly they get started. We do an assessment, which our good friends at CloudChomp, David, will talk about later. But the assessment is really around getting the data to make a case for change. So Amazon is a very data-driven company. All decisions are based on data. And we want to make sure you have the information to make the best decision for your company. So this assess phase is absolutely critical. And it leads to making a case for change, leveraging a tool such as CloudChomp to see what you have, understand the cost of how you operate now, understanding the potential benefits of various ways you could land on AWS. And an important part of this process is understanding your license situation with Microsoft and how that might change to your benefit in the form of savings when you land on AWS. So again, this assessment is all about creating a case for change. Our sixth best practice is go in eyes wide open. And our friends at ClearScale can facilitate a migration readiness assessment, which is a self-assessment of 80 different questions. These questions came or is curated by AWS Professional Services. I like to say it's the 80 questions they wish they asked the customers before you. And the intent of this facilitated workshop is to uncover areas where maybe you just haven't thought of, or areas that your team and potentially the ClearScale team can focus on in the migration plan to make sure that you're ready to operate in AWS, because certain things need to change. How you procure changes, IT services anyway. You may need to change roles and responsibilities or evolve job descriptions, for example. Governance is going to change. And all of these things, again, many of them you'll know and have thought of, but the goal here, and nobody gets all green, by the way, but the goal here is not to call people out, but to, again, identify areas where ClearScale can help and where you want to spend time during the migration planning to make sure, again, that you're mitigating all the risks and that you are ready to operate in AWS successfully. So eyes wide open, absolutely critical. Number 7 is developing a plan. So after you've got the assessment behind you and you've made the decision that I'm moving forward with a migration to AWS, you get into this mobilization phase of a migration. And this is around getting ready, right? So this is the deep dive into the architecture that you have and designing the future state. It's understanding how the different products are going to evolve, or your applications are going to evolve. And it's coming up with a phased approach of movement, right? These applications first, these databases next, a thoughtful way of approaching that move to the cloud. And an important part of this getting ready, mobilize phase is setting up your AWS environment. And for those of you that have an AWS environment, great. Glad you're a part of the family. This is an opportunity, again, for folks like ClearScale to have a look at what you've done already and determine if that environment is ready to receive the rest of your workloads or your, whatever else is still on premise. Looking at security and compliance, looking at developing a landing zone so you can manage easier the accounts that are underneath your your master account, and really kind of looking at how you're going to operate, right? So this is an important phase in the project to make sure that everybody knows who's going to do what, and we have a good sound timeline. And the importance here is again, making sure that the environment is ready, and that we know the disposition of all the applications and workloads that are set to transition. Lots of different options there when it comes to transitioning. Again, this is your opportunity to spring clean, potentially. It's an opportunity to look at leveraging new cloud native capabilities that are on AWS, leveraging maybe a newer version of a software that you've been used to. And again, the folks at ClearScale have done this a whole bunch of times and have a process to walk you through methodically, looking at each of these things, determining the outcome, and then planning accordingly. It's an opportunity to look at your databases. If you're leveraging Oracle or SQL Server and are tied to those licensing models, this is a chance to either replatform and land in a managed database where instead of patching SQL Server and managing the scalability of SQL Server, AWS does that on your behalf with RDS for SQL, or refactoring and actually looking at modern database management capabilities, whether that be Aurora or DynamoDB. But I encourage you to take the opportunity to think about long-term how your architecture evolves. I will say this, that many customers have a sense of urgency just to get out of their current situation and land on AWS, which we affectionately refer to as the lift and shift, and that provides maybe more flexibility than their current situation, or more scalability than their current situation, and then start to evolve after they're on AWS. Either way, it really is up to you as the customer as to what your priorities are, and how much you want to bite off, how much change your organization can absorb at once. So this is a critical time in the project to, again, align expectations, weigh your various options, and it really is where the expertise of the folks from ClearScale shine, because they've seen lots of patterns. They know what the trade-offs are. There's no shortage of ways to do this, and relying on somebody that's done it before can really save you a lot of pain and heartache. So absolutely a best practice, and one of the things we recommend to everybody that I talk to. And then you need to take care of your team. This transition to cloud, those who grew up in the data center, as I did, I spent 10 years at a very large hardware provider, and I'm empathetic to folks that are a little resistant to change once you feel like you've got a handle on things. And the cloud can be perceived as a fairly significant change, which it is. It represents a paradigm shift in how we deliver IT services. But we hope that your team sees it as an opportunity to learn. And we hope you create an environment for your folks that this is an opportunity to learn. I can tell you, coming again from a hardware, on-prem kind of mentality and experience to AWS, there is a lot more of my skill set that transitioned into AWS than I expected. It wasn't as foreign as I had perceived it to be. And we're trying to reduce the apprehension or the anxiety around cloud versus on-premise, and really get people to see that a lot of the same things, whether it's DNS or ports, whether it's having a server and giving permissions, like all of those same things transition. You do need to learn some of the nuances of AWS and how we do it. A lot of things are automated. There's a lot of checks and balances to make sure that you understand what you're doing. Like if you turn a piece of S3, an S3 bucket, make it public facing. There's all kinds of warnings to say, like, anybody can see this, because it could represent a security risk. So we have a lot of checks and balances there, but I really want everybody on the line here to kind of embrace learning. I think all of us got into technology because it was cool, either we're good at it, and it's constantly changing. So you have this constant need to learn new things, and sometimes that can be overwhelming. And I'd encourage you just to start learning about AWS. And if you do have a background, I think you'll see a lot of your skills and knowledge transition. But there's so much more you could do. I remember my first class, I had to create a web server, and it, did it, and had a bash script that ran in, a startup script or a boot up script that ran and created a nice little Apache server and my first little Hello World web page. And then I had to create one in London and one in Sydney, and then put that all behind a load balancer. And I did it in about 10 minutes, right? And then I sat there and thought, God, if I was in the physical world, right, the on-prem world, how long would it have taken me to get 3 web servers up and running, one in the US, one in EMEA, one in APJ, all of them behind a load balancer so that I could, route traffic accordingly or balance things out. And it was mind-boggling how, 10 minutes on AWS could result in, instant productivity, and I would have been having to figure out how to procure things, and it's night and day from a speed to delivery point of view. And then the scalability and being able to shut things off and turn things off when you're not using them, and save the money is critical. It allows for you to experiment a lot more, and really feel like you can try things and not have this tax or this penalty. And the training, and the reason training is so important is, number one, we want you to understand how the platform works. We want you to understand how security works, and we want you to understand all the new services that are coming out. And there's a lot, but we believe the more you know, the more you can take advantage, and the more efficiently you can operate. And if you're building an application or you're building a service, we had a story just the other day. We were talking to a company and they're like, yeah, we're building this thing. And we're like, we have a service that does that already, and you could just hit this API and be done. And they'd been working on it for a quarter already. And then within the afternoon, we're starting to use the service, and we're already ahead of the development that they had done because the service already existed. So we are constantly pushing the envelope from service capabilities. And the best way to know what's out there and to be able to take advantage of it is having a strong training plan. It's good for your people from a morale point of view, and then it's good, for your future state and beyond, because you're going to have people who are excited, but also knowledgeable, and able to bring that knowledge to the company. And then last but not least, this is Andy at last year's reInvent talking about, the most important things for transformation. So my 10th, lesson learned or best practice is executive alignment. Andy spoke to, senior leadership having conviction and setting a strategy, and then having aggressive goals that pushes the team, faster than maybe they feel comfortable. I just mentioned training, and when we say builders inside of AWS, we mean anybody responsible for changing the company, whether it's operations or IT. It's anybody that's doing process improvement is a part of that change culture. And then last but not least is get going, right? Start learning, start somewhere, start a POC, but don't try to analyze things to the nth degree before you get moving. So executive alignment, absolutely critical that you have people in the organization that are driving the first best practice, which was the why. So like, why are you doing this? And those executives, are setting the direction for the company. And hopefully those on the line are either those executives or you've been told to go execute these drivers. And we hope this program and this partnership can help accelerate that for you. So my last question for you is, who's ready to get started? And thank you so very much for your time today. I appreciate it. Jay, back over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ben. That was fabulous. It does lead us to our first poll question of the day. So you should be seeing that pop up on your screen. Which of these business drivers resonates with you the most? Please keep in mind that this is a multi-select, just as Ben mentioned. There's going to be a few that probably apply, but we'll wait just for a little bit as the results come in and get some feedback from Ben on what we're seeing. All right, Ben, pretty much as expected. It's pretty well spread across the business drivers, but I am seeing that cost reduction and digital transformation are right now leading the way. Are those pretty much kind of the most popular that you see as a business driver? Is it pretty well even across those 8?
Yeah, Jay, I would say cost everybody has, right? Everybody's got a cost driver. So that's kind of table stakes, and we expect that one. Interesting, like the number 2 driver, can be different on the company. Digital transformation is probably that, and then probably security. We see a lot. So anybody that's had a breach and had to deal with it and is trying to figure out how do they improve their situation, is another very popular driver for people looking for solutions when they feel like they can't keep up with again the security expectations that everybody's under.
Excellent. Well, we'll leave this poll to continue just for a little bit, but we'll go ahead and move on. Again, if you have your own questions, you can submit those in the Q&A section on the right side of your screen at any time. But now that we have an understanding of the general business drivers, Ryan, if you would start by refreshing the audience on Repligen as a company, and then tell us about your migration experience.
Thank you. So if you're just joining up, or since we began, Repligen as a company, we create products and chemicals to help the pharmaceutical industry create their products. So we don't create any pharmaceuticals ourselves, but we create biopharmaceutical processes and equipment. So our headquarters is in the East Coast in Waltham, Massachusetts. We have production facilities in I think every continent. Right now, I'm working out of Sweden. We have a facility here, as well as Netherlands, Germany, Japan, pretty much everywhere, west coast of the US. So that's presented quite a lot of challenges, which we've needed quite a lot of help with. So this couldn't come at a better time.
All right, I will let you take control at this point, Ryan.
Okay, great. So that's a bit about our company, but the challenges that we've needed to get ClearScale's help with primarily focus around our ERP. So we were coming from a little bit of a traditional on-prem ERP, not highly integrated and certainly not built to scale. We're moving into SAP, and so some of the components of that include databases, application tier, load balancing, and the main business drivers for this have been availability. One of the slides that was opened up earlier by Ben, I thought really hit the nail on the head. Data center consolidation and going global quickly are big drivers for us. So as we acquire some other companies that are in the same business as we are, bringing their data and their processes in, as well as being available and responsive, really we couldn't do it on our own without ClearScale's help and AWS as a platform. We've invested heavily in our on-prem solutions, and we have 3 data centers, but the reality is it's just impossible for us to make it as available as what we could. So those are the key things that we begin our journey with. The solution, I think I can hand this over to Ben May to describe a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ryan. So as we know, we're looking for enhanced business continuity, scalability, and availability. Coming into this, we were having challenges with the SAP HANA database. So we had to get all of these things running within Amazon and also have them highly available. So we looked at what tools to use, and we decided to use such as Linux Enterprise Server. So the Linux Enterprise Server allows us to, or it has a highly available plugin that we could basically build HA clusters in multiple data centers. So we could have the single application running across different data centers. So this is really helpful for us. And then looking at the database, SAP's HANA, we were able to actually use a built-in feature that they have for replication. And this tool allows us to log all the changes that happen on the primary node, and then those are replicated over to the secondary node. So if the primary node were to fail, the secondary node would be ready to take over with all of the data already preloaded into memory. I'll jump into the next section. So for the networking portion, we used Amazon's DNS, Route 53, with some application load balancers. So this allowed us to route properly to the actual applications. Running on the compute, we were using EC2, and we were able to host all of the SAP products on EC2 and actually have them clustered across different availability zones natively as part of the Linux enterprise servers. And then on the back end, we're using Amazon's block storage, which is basically like disk storage, and then also their EFS file system, which is like a typical NFS file share, so that we could actually have data, in different areas at once. So if you take a look at this, we kind of what we were going over before. We were using the pacemaker. It's like a heartbeat to spread the clusters across different data centers and see if anything was down, if we needed to fail over. To do this, we're actually using Amazon's IP overlaying, which allows us to route traffic no matter which availability zone or data center that the application is in. We could have one IP to point to all of those. And then once we had the HANA system replicated, we were able to basically have that in secondary data centers also. So now we have business continuity and availability. So if anything went down, it could quickly recover. As I mentioned before, everything is replicated to the secondary node in HANA. And then if we wanted to actually test for failing over for maintenance, we could fail over to these other data centers. And this also allows us to help scale up. So we could fail over, scale any of our systems, and then fail back over to our primary. Cool. I'll pass it back over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you so much for that description of how things work. I'm glad that you know it as well as you do, because I certainly don't. Well, so these results, we were able to see them immediately. So typically in our organization, we have about 20 IT staff, and pretty much everybody is overloaded and busy with what they're good at doing. None of us is an AWS expert, and we all would have had to go to a lot of training to get anywhere with any of this, and that would take us away from our day-to-day work. So this allowed us to be able to move and expand a very important part of our business and support production without taking us away from our day-to-day work. And part of a digital transformation, as mentioned earlier, is providing our internal customers with what they demand, and that's being able to react to the needs, to be able to ship products, and so on. So as far as the business continuity aspect of it, it's a deep requirement in our organization to be available, especially as spread out as we are. If someone has a problem in one region, it needs to be available somewhere else, and that's that we've been able to see right away. Great. So some of the lessons that we learned along the way was this pretty much sums it up great. So we needed to learn actually a lot about what we were doing and what we had in order to make the transition. So we needed to get deep understanding of our security. That was more obvious than we expected it to be. We had a lot of things that we needed to sort out. We didn't want to move security issues into a new platform, and we certainly wanted to prepare it for the increasing security demands that we're facing all the time. So after launch, we we had a lot of small changes, and really there weren't so much scope creep, which is typical. It's that we went through a growth period as well as COVID-19, creating massive changes as far as what our customers need. So new products and being able to move in a quick and agile way was critical to the success of our process here. Having our team members able to reach out to ClearScale has saved the day many times now. A lot of it is expertise, and some of it is looking for best practices as a trusted partner. I mentioned earlier about building out our own data centers and not being able to meet the requirements of availability and resilience and quick scaling. We have a pretty good on-prem, but we can't scale as quickly as we need to, and so that's where AWS has really stepped in and made this work.
Excellent. Great information from both of you, Ben and Ryan. I do have a quick question for Ben May. Ben, can you tell us about the process to get started with ClearScale? What is a free consultation and what happens next?
So the best thing is to reach out to our sales team, which is I believe sales@clearscale.com, and let them know what your challenges are and what you're looking to do in Amazon. And then someone like me will meet up with you and we'll go through all of those struggles and we'll look at your environment and try to see, what is kind of the low-hanging fruits and what are the true challenges, and see, what would be the most beneficial for your company right now. And then we'll try to, propose, a solution for you to either work with ClearScale to execute or, to work on your own.
I'm assuming they can come in for these free consultations without having lots of documentation. It's really just kind of understanding what challenges they're facing. Is that the case?
Yeah, everyone has different problems. So, some are more documented, like they might have a kind of a request for a proposal already built out, but some people might just be having struggles with maybe their database performances and things like that, and they're not really sure where to start. So there's no one way to go about it.
Perfect. All right. Well, now that we know the business drivers and a real world application thanks to Repligen, let's go ahead and shift to a company in CloudChomp that helps accelerate these AWS migrations. David, the floor is yours.
All righty. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. So CloudChomp is an advanced technology partner. Again, I mentioned earlier, we have two competencies with migration in Microsoft workloads. As I think Ben mentioned earlier, it can get really tricky kind of understanding your options with your Windows and SQL licenses and so forth. And so we've got tooling, and working with ClearScale can help you understand what those options are. But the reason we start with this slide is to make sure that everybody understands what we're here for. We are a technology partner. We're not a consulting services firm. We are here to provide pre and post assessment ongoing data so that experts like ClearScale and Amazon can help you when you reach those micro and macro decisions as you go through your migration and right-sizing and modernization projects. So that's what we're here to do. And I'm going to show you today what it is our product actually provides, or our company provides. And through this partnership with ClearScale and Amazon, we're able to provide an initial assessment for you to get you kind of up and running and started in that journey. So you can get kind of everything you need to help you reach a directional decision, and provided by Amazon and ClearScale. So the first thing you'll notice here is, if you have ever done an assessment online or used an online calculator, you may have found that the cloud is too difficult to save money in the cloud. And the reason why you find that is you're looking at online calculators, TCO modeling in many cases. You're looking at through the CapEx lens of what you own versus what you're using. It can be very expensive, invasive, and time-consuming to look at your current compute through the lens of your actual utilization, and then translate that into what's required in AWS buying cloud compute as a utility. And we make that process incredibly simple and fast. In fact, for VMware environments, for example, we can turn around a full TCO and right-size cost estimate in Amazon within 24 hours. And so what we're here to do is help you model your own on-prem TCO. And what that means is looking at your current assets through the lens of OpEx. The next is what it would cost to run your current compute based on your actual utilization in AWS with right sizing, and help you deliver kind of a true ROI around the project, pre and post migration. And so one thing that I want to point out about the right sizing is it's not just compute. We have very sophisticated tools to help you understand your over allocation versus your used storage as well, which is really cool. And this is another thing. This is just a screenshot of a deep dive of an individual machine. This is where you'll see the machine summary, the stats. You'll see the recommendation that we're making versus a fully provisioned lift and shift versus, if you see in orange here, this on-prem, your on-prem TCO. But whenever we make recommendations, we do so in organized buckets, with the idea that we're here to help you start thinking about looking at your CapEx environment through the lens of cloud compute as a utility. So anytime we make a recommendation, you can agree, disagree, or modify that decision. When you need help, you've got ClearScale, Amazon, and CloudChomp by your side to help you build this assessment out. But most importantly, when you want to dive into a recommendation, you can literally see into the compute of that machine to see, does this recommendation make sense to us? And if you're not happy with recommendations, you have the ability to control the outcomes and the buffers of all of our algorithms so that you're making the report suit your individual needs of your organization. A simple example of that would be, imagine if you were doing an assessment on a dev data center versus a mission critical production data center. You might be a lot more liberal with your compression algorithms for right sizing if you're dealing with dev than you are a mission critical app, where you may say, never right size less than 50% of what we've provisioned for CPU or 75% of memory, for example. So you have all the control in the tool to help you do that. And again, with experts who've done this, we've done over 650 assessments so far. So we've got a ton of experience in helping walk you through this. So what I want to talk about is what we do in the migration assessment side today that's a part of this assessment, so you understand the scope of what we're doing. We can pull data from almost any data source, including if you're in a shared tenancy colo, we have tools for looking at provisioning and utilization in those environments. The next is speed, and that we can turn around a TCO and right-size cost estimate for VMware in 24 hours. But if you have data center that's in Hyper-V or bare metal, and we're pulling data through either WMI or SNMP, those assets could take a few weeks to collect. But the breadth of what we do is really something we're truly proud of. Everything we do is completely agentless. We do not touch a single machine. We do the discovery, the TCO and right sizing for EC2 and VMware Cloud and deep dive storage analytics. We'll help you understand your Windows Server and SQL licensing options, as well as helping you start to think about more than just a lift and shift and more of a transformation. That transformation can be done pre-migration, although we see a lot of customers lift and shift to the cloud and then work on modernization after they've migrated, and we can help you in either direction. And we also have built-in app discovery and machine and application dependency mapping tools. So what you'll find with an assessment is there's two ways to look at what am I going to move first. The first is, what am I going to move first based on cost? Where can we save the most money? The other is, what am I going to move based on complexity? Meaning, I want to find the machines that have the lowest complexity score, which we provide in our application, based on the number of applications running, the number of dependencies. So you can start looking at those easy to move workloads first. Some of you may have 10 people on staff with, DevOps, advanced competencies from Amazon and have all of this experience. Others of you may have less experience. And so you may want to move workloads that are easiest first to start dipping your foot in the pool and kind of getting some understanding of an experience with easier to move workloads first. So you can look at this migration through any lens. Finally, on this page, on the breadth section, is this migration planner based on the 7 R's. Amazon has something called the 7 R's. If you're not familiar with it, it's definitely something worth searching and bookmarking. And you'll be talking about that a lot with the people at ClearScale. And the idea is looking at all of your assets and determine what's going to get retained on-prem, what you're going to retire, what you want to re-architect versus rehost or re-platform. And then once you build your filters and tag those assets, all of the financial modeling, the complexity modeling tools can be built and run through the lens of any of the filters you developed. And knowing what goes where really gives your partner a great head start on what to help you focus on to build that first or second or third wave of migration. Finally, this is really what we consider our secret sauce, is this collaboration. If you've ever done a TCO analysis or a migration assessment before, you probably had an invasive, expensive tool dropped in your lap for discovery. It was exported, thrown into a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint. Somebody massaged the information and handed it back to you. And it was a report that you looked at and said, okay, now we've got to figure out, is this right or wrong? The collaborative nature of the assessment you'll run with ClearScale and Amazon and CloudChomp is it's where you are in the driver's seat. Amazon has 2 very important taglines. One is better together, and the other is builders build. You've probably seen that big billboard at the airport, or at least maybe you did before COVID 9 months ago. But we developed a tool that puts you in the driver's seat, building your own outcome with us by your side. So once the assessment is done, it's not something that was put in your lap where you've got to kind of understand what it's all about. You build the assessment yourself. So when the outcome is done, it's something that already has your stamp of approval. That's why we're moving workloads 25% faster to the cloud and moving much larger workloads because of our ability to tag to the 7 R's and really encompass your entire environment. So these are some of the things we do today that are really unique. Going forward, if you want to subscribe to our service longer term, we have accountability tracking. So once the migration actually starts, we can track the asset based on speed, what was provisioned to plan, and what was provisioned based on the expected spend or budget in AWS, serving as a system of record. We can also help you constantly modernize and look for that next wave of migration. And so unless you're relocating everything to VMware Cloud, over a weekend, it usually is as things move in waves. So the idea is while you're managing your accountability reports towards how did we migrate to plan, you'll have this next wave migration. You're constantly looking for that next workload. And then most importantly, not just right-sizing pre-migration, but monitoring VMC, EC2, and so forth to look for native services ongoing in AWS. So we can plug into EC2 and constantly tell you where there's opportunities to reach out to ClearScale to learn about Aurora, other native services, managed service opportunities, and right-sizing CPU and optimization on EC2. If you choose BYOL and you move Windows workloads and SQL workloads over on dedicated hosts, at some point they may come end of life. That's something that can follow you to the cloud and something you may want to manage. Plus, the app discovery and dependency mapping can also follow into EC2 on the native virtual machines in AWS. And so I hope I've given you a nice picture of what the initial assessment looks like and then the long-term value of the technology that we've developed and if that might be of use to you. But overall, I really want to kind of reiterate, the CloudChomp solution was built to solve a specific problem. And that was helping customers understand the complexity and financial impact of a migration without any hurdles, without complexity, huge human resource roadblocks, and invasiveness. We have a tool that is completely agentless, sets up in 30 minutes to an hour or less. And sometimes within 24 hours, you've got a complete financial picture. A few weeks later, a total roadmap for what that might look like for a migration to Amazon. And then with ClearScale and Amazon by our side, you've got all of the resources you need to help you kind of understand your options and start making some of those smart decisions. And to engage with us, you can email me at david.pulaski@CloudChomp. Just let me know you were on this session. You can also email support, sales, and so forth. But what we really encourage you to do is to reach out to ClearScale to start talking about your project. They'll also engage CloudChomp, and kind of you'll have an expert here driving this engagement for you. They are one of the our what we call C3, which is CloudChomp certified partners. They're absolute experts at utilizing every inch of value they can extract from our tool to give you every piece of information you need to help you make all of those right decisions. And so we've done many migration assessments with ClearScale, hundreds with AWS, and we're definitely here to help you. And our job is to take all of the kind of time, complexity, cost out of that process for you and make this process super, super simple. And with that, I'm going to pass it back. But thank everyone at ClearScale and Amazon for including us in this session. We really, really appreciate it.
Excellent. Greatly appreciated for you being here as well, David. And this leads us to our next poll question. Have you performed a cloud cost assessment in the past? Pretty black and white, yes or no. So we'll give it just a minute for some of those results to come in, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on this, David.
Yeah, it's really a great question. We find, I've found that people kind of fall into two categories when it comes to they've done it before. One was they did it before, but they kind of did it on their own, and they didn't think about their assets in terms of CapEx. We just hired a new class of employees here, and one of the things we talk to them about is when you have your on-prem CapEx environment, you've got to staff up your equipment to your highest utilization point. And then the rest of the year, like let's say you're in retail, there's 9 months of year maybe where you only use 50% of your resources. So when you're plugging in to an online calculator everything you own, you're really looking at a tremendous amount of over-provisioning. And so the other option is there are tools out there that can kind of help you look at your utilization, but they're incredibly invasive. There are tools out there that if you want to kind of understand your SQL workloads, your additions, versions, and what's going on with them, you've got to give security credentials in many cases to these applications, what people are just not willing to do. So we've managed to find a way to kind of help customers who want to do that deep dive utilization and do it in a really, really simple and effective way. I can't see the results of the poll. How does it look?
Yeah, so 80% have said no at this point, and so I'm curious if that is surprising or fairly common from what you see.
So I would say that's fairly common, and the reason we exist. So just as a quick little side note, many of you who are using VMware may have heard of a product called the Capacity Planner. It was built and sold to VMware in the early 2000s by my partner. And that product was built to solve a similar problem. People were over-provisioned in bare metal in the early 2000s trying to figure out how to properly right-size and provision into virtualization. And now what we have is the similar problem, which is over-provisioning in bare metal and virtualization, trying to get even more efficient in buying cloud compute as a utility. And so without an easy to implement tool, what most customers see is someone dropping some humongous invoice on their desk or asking consultants to come in and dig deep into machines when customers are like, look, I want to find a simple and easy way to determine if the finances work. So help me do that before we can say yes to start moving workloads. And so that's why a lot of people haven't run these reports before. And it's because they've been approached with something that was too invasive too early in the cycle. And that's the reason we're in business, is it's completely agentless, plugs in 30 minutes to an hour. You've got reports in most cases the next day. And from there, you've got more data to where, hey, yeah, this looks like it's going to work for us. Now let's start installing more deep dive tools to start getting under the covers to start moving these workloads. So that's where kind of people like ClearScale are going to have much more advanced technology to start really moving workloads for you. But people have really struggled to find an easy way to get to a directional decision. And so this is definitely not surprising.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David.
You're welcome. Appreciate you including us.
Yeah. Well, next up is Curtis Stanley from Cure4U. Curtis, if you would please refresh everyone's memory on Cure4U, and then let's explore the challenges your company was facing prior to migration.
Great. All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are all set.
Perfect. Okay. So for any of you that joined since my first attempt to introduce us, we're a small company that we provide virtual healthcare tools for patients who need support when they're in their homes and not in a bricks and mortar healthcare establishment. And our company began in the early to mid 2000s in Denmark. And at that time, it was a broad population convenience tool serving a significant portion of that population in the EU, in Denmark and France and Germany. And what we did in 2015 was establish a US company, and after a couple of years became aggressive in 17 to really launch this to become a significant player in the virtual care in the United States. What that meant was that we were going from a convenience ad hoc passive tool that was really great, if you wanted to use it, to something that was really mission critical and embedded in the providers' organizations and how they do business minute by minute in the US. And so the practices that we had in the EU weren't really going to serve our customers well in this US environment. So we really had to build organizational competencies, both from an environmental technology footprint to support this new direction. We needed expertise technically, we needed mentoring and to develop our existing staff and also to attract new staff. But what we really needed to do was kind of some spring cleaning, figure out what we needed to do differently. We were running in Amazon, but it was still essentially the same thing that we ran in Europe in the closet in a client server environment locally. We needed new skills and tools, and we needed to adopt some new process discipline so that we could take ownership and kind of overcome the muscle memory for our technical people. And from a culture perspective, both leadership and our teams had to really get through that. And so this is what ClearScale brought to us. We had unrealistic expectations about how easy and fast we might do it. And these guys are really great to help us learn how to become contemporary and take advantage of what AWS could do, to help us take advantage of scalability and to manage that from a cost perspective, and then to help make sure that we had some oversight that as we were doing this, that our environment was going to really be compliant from a cyber risk mitigation and HIPAA compliance perspective. We were, and at the time we started working with ClearScale in the summer of 2019. We only had about 100 clinics in the United States, but we knew we were going to have really extensive growth. We were planning for something like 15,000 providers and 1,000 clinics, and we're pretty close to that now, expecting to get to 4, 5, 6 million patient encounters annually. COVID really made that happen very, very quickly. What we were doing was really for early adopters until COVID happened. And then everybody wanted to do it. It was just life or death. And so we had luckily gone through this process and had the infrastructure in place and had already had this experience that allowed us to handle what was happening this spring. And we would have been in really sad shape had we not had this experience and gone through this process with ClearScale in advance. So it was really a godsend for us to be well prepared, and exactly what we do. It was kind of a finest hour for us in our organization with healthcare. So I think you know, Ben, I'll need you to kind of talk about some of the technical pieces, but again, what we really needed was to make sure that we had the guidance and know how to really take advantage of a a properly architected cloud solution that could scale and could give us, high availability and could give us auto scaling support. And we had no clue. And as a business guy, I still don't know a lot of the details, but that's what ClearScale did for us, both from an expertise perspective and also making sure that our technology in AWS was what we needed. So Ben, can you give us some more insight there?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Curtis. So we came in and we needed to build out kind of a CI/CD pipeline and deploy this and migrate their existing data. And so we kind of had the opportunity to build kind of a perfect best practice architecture. We used multiple availability zones, which I mentioned before, our data centers. And so we had high availability within their infrastructure. We had performance increase with using CloudFront, which allows us to take advantage of Amazon's content delivery network, along with Elasticache, which is in-memory data. And then we use all of Amazon's tools to reach that HIPAA compliancy. And then obviously we use Amazon's business associates addendum and certificates that they provide to perform any audits that Cure4You needs to in the future. So I'll kind of go over some of the details with the diagram. As I mentioned, we had a highly available infrastructure. We had the front end was on CloudFront, which was the CDN, and the data was stored in S3 buckets. And this is really great because we could tie in Amazon's web application firewall directly to this. So if anyone is trying to do anything strange, we could have rules built out before they even get into the infrastructure. They are declined by Amazon's web application firewall. So once they get, once the people get past that and they actually get into touching the data, we have highly available servers and multiple availability zones running on EC2. So that's the simple VM model for AWS. And so to ensure that we are following compliance there, we actually ran a tool called OSEC, which is an intrusion detection system, which is able to see, basically review any logs for accesses and see if there's any strange access patterns that are happening on the machines. So it's very useful. Once we get past this layer, we mentioned that we're using Elasticache. We're also using Elasticsearch and Amazon's RDS. So these are all managed services within Amazon. So now Cure4You doesn't even need to manage those tools. They could focus on actually developing product instead of just paying attention if their Redis is up and running at the moment. Amazon takes care of those. So it's a great thing for them to kind of have that freedom. And to tie this all in, we use Jenkins to build out that CI/CD pipeline. So to get their applications actually running on these servers, we deploy it all through Jenkins. In order to do this, we had to migrate some data into production. So we did the DNS cutovers, we did the freezes on the database, and then cut over everything for the actual users to start using the new database. So our new production environment in Amazon. So all of this is great. We love to see this type of design in Amazon. It's very simple, but yet it's perfect best practice architecture, and we see it works really well for Cure4You. I'll pass it back over to you, Curtis.
Great, thanks. I think this was, like I said, it was critical for us. We were struggling for an opportunity to prepare for the growth that we knew was coming. We had a very small dev team. They were very nimble and very competent, but they had extremely narrow experience. They had no AWS expertise, mostly in dev, limited DevOps or SysOps types of experience. So what we really needed was the skills and the tools that ClearScale brought to the table to allow us to understand what best practices looked like. And we had quite a process to really understand how to adopt new process discipline and to really make that stick. And so how to take ownership. So, the automated management and deployment, our ability to do change control and to have a structured deployment approach It took a while for our team to learn that you need to be more structured, but it came very quickly and has resulted in dramatic improvements in stability and so forth. The auto scaling tools have been wonderful to help us as our growth. Those things used to be quite a problem, and we would have performance issues. We would have service impacts. Those things don't happen anymore. Again, there was a learning curve for us to realize how we needed to improve our applications and how they behaved so that they properly, didn't trigger alerts and alarms because we really hadn't understood the environment that we would be working in. So we needed to do a little maturity in our own code, but that worked really well. Our availability has dramatically improved. The way we do upgrades now, rolling upgrades, we have provisions with our large customers that give us timing and windows for critical maintenance windows and things like that, and we haven't had to use them after a few months and getting comfortable with the way the new environment works and getting some new DevOps staff and really learning how to really take advantage of the new architecture. We simply haven't had to take advantage of those planned downtimes, and we've been able to do this really well. And the security, the perimeter defenses and intrusion detection and so forth that is in place now, that is much more robust than was in place before, has been dramatically improved and helped us have a much better security awareness, which is critical in our business. And so that's been very, very helpful. I think from a lessons learned perspective, we knew that we didn't have the expertise we needed, and there's just no substitute. The remark earlier that you can't compress experience is absolutely true. We have very bright, very nimble young people who really want to do all they can do. Our culture is very committed, but there were simply huge gaps. And we did have to deal with some of the cultural issues. But ClearScale was great to work with. We had lots of discussions at times when we needed to around facilitating dealing with some of the human factor that was involved in just kind of culture and change. And they were very tuned in to the culture and the teams. And sometimes it was our leadership and sometimes it was our staff, our team, technical teams, but that was very, very helpful. We had no clue how to take care or to use these automated tools, and we were guided through that. We didn't even know what the right tools were. So what does a best practice environment look like, and what are the skills and practices that we should adopt? So the one thing that I think is incredibly helpful for us in our business is that we have most of our client organizations are in a multi-tenant environment, but we have a number of very significant organizations, very large health systems with 80 or 90 hospitals and 500 or 600 clinics. And we have one group that's got 10% of the OBGYNs in the United States. And these guys really want their own private cloud deployment. And doing that was practically unmanageable and impossible for us before we went through this architecture transition and migration. And those things we can do without heartburn, very cost effectively, very efficiently from a technical staff and burden perspective. And that has really opened the door for us to manage and grow our business in a way. And that's exactly what we needed. And ClearScale was very helpful in helping us get where we needed to go. We didn't know what the details were. We just said, here are our business objectives, help us figure out how to make the transition. And they were great tour guides to get us through the process. Any questions?
Excellent information, Curtis. Thank you. And so the floor is certainly open for questions for Curtis. And I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of times I think we get the question of what do I need to have prepared before engaging with ClearScale? And I know we briefly mentioned it earlier, but you really can come to a consultation without having loads of documentation as much as, like you were saying, showing up, here are the problems, we just need a solution, what do you guys recommend? and ClearScale can really take it from there. So were you surprised by ClearScale's response whenever you came to ClearScale with your problems?
Well, I don't know that I was surprised. We were really pleased. I think what happened was that I knew. I mean, I've been in the healthcare IT business for 25 years, and came from a large cap company and became part of a venture capital and a small cap organization. So, as a venture partner, you know where you need to go, but you have to do this in steps that are appropriate for your size as you grow. So we knew we had huge gaps and we needed to develop a lot of competencies. What we discovered were a lot of very specific levels of detail. I mean, we discovered late in our process that we're still running into tools that are active in our platform that our staff, our technical team, had completely forgotten about. And so we ran into lots of surprises. We've had very inadequate documentation, and so they were very tolerant. They learned how they were very persistent, and guided us to kind of have the right level of attention to what's important and what's not important. And sometimes they had alternative pathways to kind of sidestep what might have been going down a rat hole, trying to remediate some legacy practice or legacy tool. And it's like, well, if that wasn't really in the scope in the beginning. However, this is the way we need to use contemporary current AWS tools and other current approaches to address that function. And you can kind of retire those kinds of things. And as we went through the certification for HIPAA compliance and so forth, that made it really good, because we then could create comprehensive documentation, and it put us in a position to really be confident with the architecture, and it gave us a foundation for documentation going forward and management that allowed us to establish process discipline and change control.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, Curtis, for giving us your use case and walking us through really everything that you guys experienced. Before we get to the Q&A portion for the entire panel, Ben, I would greatly appreciate it if you could educate us on database migration benefits and common use cases.
Migrations sorry, which if we look at database migration benefits within AWS, coming to AWS has quite a bit of things you can actually benefit from. So first is scalability. We always talk about horizontally scaling within Amazon, but one thing that we don't talk about too much is vertically scaling. If you're actually coming from on-prem to vertically scale, you're going to have to go out and provision new services, new computers and whatnot, servers, so that you can move over your databases to those new servers. But within AWS, you could scale vertically really within a click of a button. So it's a really good tool if you're looking at doing something. If you have peak load during sales times like Black Friday or during Christmas time, or you have these sort of cycles within your application, you could scale directly for those, so you're not spending money year round. We have just typical reliability that some other databases offer, but within Amazon, it's really great to take advantage of their multiple availability zones within their managed databases. So if we look at something like MySQL, you could host it on your own EC2 instances or your own VMs on-prem. But within AWS, you could use Amazon's relational database service. And this allows you to have something like a multi-AZ, which is a multiple data centers deployment within really a click of a button. So this is great. You could deploy into two separate areas by just checking off an extra box, and this allows you to kind of take over that scalability portion where you're bringing down your machines to scale up, you could actually fail over to your secondary, scale up the other one, and then fail back over. So you're kind of always up and always live, and you don't have to worry about actually managing that yourself. You're going to rely on Amazon to manage that. So that kind of goes into the fully managed portion. RDS is fully managed, but you're still seeing some of the actual machines that are running. Within Amazon, they have something called Aurora, which has a serverless component too. So instead of seeing the actual machines running from MySQL or Postgres, you could take advantage of Aurora serverless, and they'll actually scale up based on the demand. So if you have a high amount of CPU processing that's hitting that machine, they'll add extra processing and extra RAM to that instance for you without you actually noticing. And there's very smart ways to do that. They look to make sure there's no long-running queries. They send traffic to read instances so that you don't actually get any downtime on your machines. So it's quite a useful tool. And then, so it depending if you have high processing or high database counts, they'll look at that for you and then scale up. And then one of the most useful portions is actually scaling back down. So this gets into the cost effectiveness of these databases, and Amazon is running them as small as you can, and using all of your money there. So with the serverless portion, they'll scale it back down for you. With the other RDS portions, you can scale it back down yourself. And then also within Amazon, I mentioned Aurora versus RDS. Aurora manages its own MySQL or Postgres, and these run at a fraction of a cost. So they're about a 20 or 30% savings versus the typical MySQL. So you could actually run your same database using Amazon's Aurora, and it'll save you even more costs from what you're getting on-prem. Ben, did you want to jump in for the migration paths?
Yeah, sure, happy to. And the paths I mentioned in my slide deck, you can certainly lift and shift the existing database. Again, if you're under time pressures and the operating system is supported, that's the fastest and easiest way. But certainly doesn't take advantage of the numerous benefits that have been engineered over the last 10 years by AWS that Ben mentioned. So moving to RDS, where it's a managed capability, where we as AWS handle the OS and the updates and patches and so forth to the database itself, the software itself, allowing your team, instead of managing the database, to then focus on the queries and how the database interacts with the applications. Again, up-leveling your skills and focusing on value-added services, while the kind of undifferentiated heavy lifting of just running the database is handled by AWS. And then again, potentially liberating yourself from expensive traditional relational database software licensing. I think SQL Server or Oracle. You could go with Aurora, which doesn't have a software license associated with it, has the scalability, the redundancy that was mentioned by Ben, as well as there are countless, well, not countless, you can actually count them. There are a lot of different database options that you have. The internet and the speed with which data is being created and consumed has caused the need for alternatives to the traditional relational database, like DynamoDB or DocumentDB, or I mean, there are a number of them. We've got a time series. We've got all kinds of different ways to manage data in new and different kind of paradigm. So the cool thing is that the ClearScale team can help you assess kind of how you've been managing data, talk about how your users consume data, or ideally what you'd like to do with that data, and then start to recommend different options and migration paths to those different services. Back to you.
Great. So if we're looking at a few of those different services within Amazon, we have typical relational databases like MySQL or SQL, and then we have our NoSQL databases like MongoDB. Um, we have Cassandra, and then we have going into columnar databases that would be kind of in-memory or faster databases. So if we look at these, we do have migration paths for a lot of these, or most of them. So looking at Oracle and SQL has been mentioned, we have Aurora that gets rid of your licensing costs for those. A lot of people are starting to do this to move on to like .NET Core, get rid of your SQL Server licensing cost, along with your SQL Server cost for your your Windows licensing cost along with your SQL Server licensing cost, and moving to Aurora and saving that kind of money right off the bat there, and not being locked into any new updates on those licenses that come up. And then looking at something like MongoDB, MongoDB is great. It's used by a lot of developers. A lot of people love it. We have an option called Document DB, and that is almost a one-for-one. There's small differences in there, but we could migrate using the database migration service directly from MongoDB into Document DB, and then a lot of your tools like Mongoose will still work with Document DB. Going into like Apache Cassandra, so we use typically we try to move into DynamoDB if the workload is light, or if the workload is kind of simple enough, depending on how the NoSQL database or how the application uses your NoSQL database. DynamoDB is extremely scalable, super fast. It is an amazing tool if you could get on it. It is kind of like always we try to use DynamoDB unless there's some sort of necessity we have to go to another tool. And then if you want just a drop-in service, Amazon has released Amazon Key Spaces so that you could use Key Spaces instead of Cassandra if you don't want to actually change up your development to use DynamoDB. And then lastly, if we're looking at some of these data warehouses, Amazon has an extremely fast data warehouse called Redshift. And you can move your data directly into Redshift, but Redshift has a ton of other integrations with AWS. You can build off data lakes from Redshift. You could have your data lake in Amazon's object storage in S3 and use Redshift to read off of that. You could do materialized views, all kind of amazing things in Redshift. So it is really great for a lot of people to actually put their data in Redshift or in S3 and then read directly from that to do their extract, transformation, load processes, or any of their business analytics from there. So we'll look at just some of the migration offers that we have. This is modeled kind of after the migration acceleration program that Ben mentioned earlier. And we usually start with that migration readiness assessment. It takes about a day. And during that time, we go and we kind of follow through the questions that AWS has laid out. This is a plan built out by AWS. We establish any like challenges, anything that we're going to need to understand going forward in your organization. And we determine the next steps and if we're going to be continuing on the migration readiness side, or we could do this project a different way, depending on what the needs are of the business. And then going into the migration planning, we spend about 4 weeks here. So we go through many different work streams. We establish the business use cases. We go through security. We go through your organization. We go through your portfolio of applications, and we decide, how we're going to be moving each one of those things. Then we use a tool like CloudChomp, and it's an extremely good tool. David's presentation was great. We get the TCO from that, and then we also look at some of those tools like managed services, and we try to say, we try to build like a blended model of your assets at your company, not your assets, your employees at your company, and we try to say, okay, if they're building off of the managed service, they're going to be spending their time elsewhere, which would provide you kind of a different type of ROI. So we forecast all of that, and then you could actually see how much you're going to be saving moving to Amazon. And it's interesting, in the poll we had cost savings was number one, And then I think like third or fourth, it was productivity and agility. And usually those go hand in hand. So it's interesting to see, everyone's interested in cost savings, but productivity and agility is really what makes you your money. So sometimes they go hand in hand, and we miss that sometimes. When we're just kind of looking at the cost of this. Once we do this, we do a pilot migration, 1 to 2 applications. We try to find some of the what is the low-hanging fruit, what are the common applications, and then what are the edge applications, and decide, do we need to use which ones do we need to do a pilot of? And we usually do those applications, and then we say, okay, are we ready to do this at scale? Now we move into the migration execution. So once we get into the migration execution, we do the large-scale migration. It could be 50 to 10,000 servers, but this is all a model that we'll build based on different sprints. So we build all of that in the planning, and then we execute in the migration execution. And that's our main way of doing the migrations for applications. So Jay, do you want to jump in?
I do. Yeah. So thank you so much from everybody. We've now reached the very end of the presentation where we've got a handful of questions rolling in. And we'll start with this one, which appears to be centered towards CloudChomp and David. Does CloudChomp require agents? I think I heard you say it doesn't, but I want to make sure.
Yeah. So we collect data. We've got basically a discovery tool called CC Explorer. You can also drop in flat files, by the way, if you want, but you're not going to get a lot of really rich utilization data to help you find those opportunities for serverless and auto scale and spot pricing and things like that. So most customers use our CC Explorer. It has today 3 main components. One is it pulls utilization and provisioning and tagging information from vCenter. The other is it pulls from either SNMP for Linux or WMI for Windows machines, all of the utilization and provisioning off of Hyper-V or bare metal machines or shared tenancy colo assets, as well as the application discovery and machine dependencies. And one thing I'll note is we were just talking a lot about Document and DynamoDB from MongoDB and Aurora and RDS. And once we can see what application is running, we'll start to point you in those right directions. But everything I just described from our perspective is totally agentless. Our application sets up a virtual machine and connects to tools that are already capturing the data you're looking for. So our application is totally agentless. We do not touch a single machine. We spin up an OVA or a virtual machine in your environment, and then from there, we let the other management tools do all the work.
Excellent. And then I've got another question here, which we may need to go around the horn for some different perspectives. If I know I want to migrate, why do I need to go through the assess and mobilize phases? And Ben Schreiner, I think I'll start with you, kind of stressing the importance of assess and mobilize.
Yeah, so assess is important. And again, if you know you want to migrate, usually at most companies, there are numerous stakeholders, a CFO, a CEO, whomever. So if the technical team knows they want to migrate, knows that's the future state, the assess phase helps you build the financial case so that other stakeholders who do care about cost and other things understand that. In addition, it gives you a good feel for, the size of the migration. Depending on the size of the migration, you could qualify for different funding programs inside of AWS. So the assess phase is important for us to get our arms around kind of what you're talking about. And then mobilize, again, is coming up with that plan. So the assess phase allows us to gauge and provide you, kind of financials, to share with any stakeholders that may have a vested interest that, again, may not be apparent right now, but may be apparent when you need to ask for money for consultancy or, purchases of any kind.
And then Curtis, Ryan, either of you have a perspective on why the assess phase would be so critical?
Yeah, so speaking from the customer perspective, without the assessment, there's a lot of unnecessary work that could go into such a project, as well as learning about what you're doing and what you want to transform.
Excellent. All right, let's see. What are some of the common pitfalls in migration that I can try to avoid? I know that I often hear proper documentation is critical. But again, Ben Schreiner or Curtis, either one of you want to jump in on this one?
I'll jump in. Again, having a plan to execute and sticking to the plan is pretty important. Scope creep and people not being focused can certainly derail things. Unfortunately, we all work for companies, and companies have priorities, and sometimes those priorities change. So making sure that the migration is the or close to the top priority for the organization can help ensure that the resources that are aligned to it stay aligned to it and can keep the momentum. And then again, I'd encourage those who are listening, right? It's really seek counsel from those experts, and they've done this before, and they're trying to help you avoid, stepping on landmines or pitfalls. So ask the questions, seek their advice, and then come up with your own plan, and then stick to it.
Yeah, and I would echo that we had rather unrealistic expectations of how quickly and simply we might be able to do this, and we got very good guidance that there were lots of, ClearScale was very good at letting us know what our pinch points and our risk areas were. So we knew with their guidance pretty well what we needed to prepare leadership for and kind of what the spillover effects were. So we didn't have a detailed plan until we received that kind of detailed guidance, but it was really critical for us to be able to anticipate. And without that guidance, we would have been in a much more reactive mode.
Excellent. Well, I think I'll begin to wrap this up. Again, thank you to everybody that participated and attended. We do have a few more webinars rapidly approaching, including how to build modern applications and innovate faster with DevOps. That'll be on October 8th. Building serverless applications with AWS Amplify and AWS App Sync on October 21st. And then multiple webinars on database migrations are in the works, including a deep dive into AWS Aurora, migration without disruption, and migrating and modernizing mission-critical databases. So please do keep watch of your email, as these invites will be going out soon. A big thank you again to our panel for the time and the effort that they've put forth. I'll be sending out notifications when the webinar is ready to view and share online to everybody. Otherwise, lots of great information from today's webinar. But should you have any questions, please schedule that free consultation with our solutions architects by simply reaching out to sales@clearscale.com. And finally, we look forward to seeing you at many more webinars to come, and certainly hope you have a safe and successful rest of your week. So thank you again, and we will be closing this out. Appreciate it, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.